25.
Right.
So the issue for me, I see Jared Goff as being highly questionable. And I think the reason he's played so well the last couple of years is probably Sean McVay. And that's probably why all these owners are going out looking for the next Sean McVay, because they see, look, this Jared Goff is shaky, but under a competent or a brilliant offensive coordinator, he looks great. But there's only so much Sean McVay can do.
Yeah, no, and Sean McVay, Jared Goff spoke to the media earlier this week. We're going to be hearing from them because, I mean, I look at this matchup and you see, it's funny looking at the coaching hires, right? Everyone's, we got to get somebody that was related to McVay, and he worked with him or Google searched him, shook his hand one time. We got to hire that guy. But it's hard, it's difficult to realize, hey, they've only won one playoff game.
Yeah, and the thing with Sean McVay is, he's different. He's not just a young guy who's a coordinator. I really think he has a gravitas and a natural ability to lead that Kyle Shanahan doesn't have, that most of these young coordinators don't have. Cliff Kingsbury, he may be very good. I'm talking about the young head coach with the Arizona. He may be very good with his scheme. He might be impressive in an interview, but is he a head coach? The thing about these young head coaches, they're not dynamic, and more importantly, they don't have a network. So when you hire Freddie Kitchens or you hire Cliff Kingsbury, they don't know position coaches. So the GM has to hire him. So now you've assembled this entire coaching staff where people don't know each other. I don't know. That's not what Sean McVay, that's not what he did. He had people in line. He knew Wade Phillips. He brought in quality position coaches with him. He had a network. If you're hiring a head coach just because of scheme, we've talked about this before. There's so many other considerations, and if you just want a scheme, hire him as your coordinator. You don't need to give him, you don't need to make him your head coach. But I understand where the owners are coming from. What they're seeing is, look at all these young coaches have success with these young quarterbacks. We need a young quarterback. We're making big investments, drafting him in the first round. I don't want to hear from some old-time NFL coach that it's going to take 3 years and he doesn't fit our system, or we can only draft a guy who came from an under-center scheme, because guys who are coming from air raid schemes are working. So if I'm drafting high up, I want a coach who can make that investment work. I want a guy who can make Baker Mayfield work, and Freddie Kitchens did. So that's great, but they're going, in my opinion, too far, and in a couple of years, these owners are going to rediscover grown-ups and leadership and other factors beyond just X's and O's.
That prompts a new discussion. I want to dive into it, but first, let's hear from Jared Goff, Sean McVay, the parties involved for the NFC title game.
Yeah, I think we gel together well on the road and have that mindset of us against the world and all that. And when it's loud, we love it and try to relish in it and try to enjoy it. And it'll be no different this weekend.
Yeah, I think really our team's consistently played well, whether we're playing at home or whether we're playing on the road. And I think it's a credit to just their ability to be able to lock in, focus on the task at hand. When you go into some of these environments where, the crowds are great, they've got a huge home field advantage. I think that's kind of that us against everybody else mentality. The guys kind of embrace that. But ultimately, it's about trying to win a football game, whether we're at home or on the road. Certainly, you'd love to always be playing in the Coliseum if you could, but it's a great opportunity for us nonetheless.
Yeah, I think a lot is talked about the underdog mentality, and I think that's an easy thing for people to rally around and, chip on the shoulder, and underdog, nobody thinks we can do it. And then, you go out and you prove them wrong. But what's really not talked about a whole lot is when you do have the hype, right? Or when you do have everyone picking you as a preseason contender and all that stuff. I think it's much harder to handle success than it is failure, right? Everybody's going to want to bounce back with their best effort after failure, and yet after success or after people picking you to be, one of the top teams, it's easier to get complacent. And so I think Sean has done a great job of making sure that there's always a sense of urgency with us and the way that we practice and the way that we prepare, but also embracing that role a little bit, and challenging ourselves to see how good we can be.
And hearing from those guys really opens up a new discussion for me, because I look at the Rams in the NFC, I look at the Chiefs in the AFC. Both these teams are in the same division as the Raiders and the 49ers, okay? They're related that way. Starting with the Rams, what does the Rams being in this position say about the 49ers and the fact that I think they seem far apart?
Yeah, I mean, It's a very interesting comparison. Like you said, they're in the same division. And the way I look at it is the Rams are the premier franchise in the NFC that hasn't won a Super Bowl. And the Niners, I would consider them one of the worst teams, one of the worst franchises in the NFC. And it's interesting because just a few years ago, they were both bottom feeders. They were both awful with no leadership. And Sean McVay comes in, turns that team around instantly. Kyle Shanahan comes here and has a lot of excuses. He's on the 5-year plan. He's on the Joseph Stalin 5-year plan. Wait. It's going to work out eventually. And fans, media of the Bay Area have been so accustomed to losing, they buy it. And they say, yeah, you know, it takes a long, long time to turn these teams around. They're making progress. Look at George Kittle. Look at this little thing here or this little thing there. Maybe in 4 or 5 years, the Niners will be good, or they'll figure it out, or Jed York will be a serious owner. But you have to remind yourself, look around the league, look at LA. There are these franchises that turn it around very, very quickly. And if you have a competent GM and a competent head coach, you can get it done in a year or two. Look at the Rams, look at the Bears. I think it's a good reminder that Bay Area fans, don't settle. Don't believe these teams when they say, hey, we only won 4 games, but we're making progress. Because real progress is being made just 350 miles south.
Yeah, and I also, too, stay within the NFC West. I look at Seattle,
Yes.
okay? This is a team that was supposed to be rebuilding this year. What's happening? They gutted the entire defense. They chose to build around Wilson. And, I mean, they were this close to being in the divisional round.
That's right. And that's what's so tough for the Niners is they're in a division with 2 premier franchises. The Rams could go to the Super Bowl. The Seahawks are a little bit down, but it's clear as long as Pete Carroll's there and Russell Wilson's there, they're never going to be bad.
Yeah.
They're always going to be decent.
Yeah.
And you can't say that about the 49ers. The 49ers, what you could say is as long as Jed York is the owner, they're going to be bad. Unless they have some head coach who can cut through all of that crap, all of the dysfunction that goes along with this organization, like Harbaugh, who can have such a strong will that he can override all that nonsense. And Kyle Shanahan has a lot going for him. He's smart. He's clever. Does he have a strong will like Harbaugh? Can he cancel out all that negative juju, whatever you want to call it, that's going around with the Niners? So far, no. And you know what? The thing with Sean McVay, he seems like he can. I mean, the Rams were just as dysfunctional. They were just as backward as the 49ers. And he comes in and now they're a premier franchise.
Right. I think one of the things I heard about Sean McVay is that it's like he doesn't coach football. He's not teaching it. It's like we're having a discussion about it. And it seems like he's a guy that empowers his players.
Yes. And another thing that's subtle, look at the personalities on the Rams. There are a lot of brash, big personalities.
It had the potential to be a tire fire.
And I think before the season, a lot of people looked at that team and said, gee, Sean McVay can't handle Dominican Sue. He can't handle Marcus Peters. I don't know. Well, he did.
Yeah.
And he's 33. And they all respect him. You got to give him credit because Kyle Shanahan's almost 40. And I'm not saying players like that don't respect him. All I'm saying is he seems to avoid him. Because I'm in that locker room every day, and that team is the nicest team. And that's great for me. It makes my job very easy. I can go up to anyone on the team and
approachable.
Say, hey, you got a minute? I got 10. What you need? But on the football field, I think they're also nice. And I think a real championship football team, you look at the teams that are still alive, they have a mixture of personalities. They have some nice guys, some grizzled veteran professionals, but they also have some nuts, some brash guys, some people who are, not nice. Harbaugh's teams did. The kind of guys that you would want having your back in a dark alley fight. Right. The Niners, I don't know, man. They would probably try to talk it out.
Despite being critical of them. They're still cordial and pleasant, will give interviews.
They are the biggest people. I mean, not petty at all. Well, Dante Pettis blocked me on Twitter. Jimmy Garoppolo blocked me on Twitter. Everyone else is very big. And you know what, Dante, I'm sorry for whatever I said. You probably were justified in blocking me. I'm not a big fan of yours.
When did Garoppolo block you?
A week after getting the starting job. I don't know what I gave him a C+ for his performance against the Bears. I mean, he won the game. They only scored 15 points. I thought he was decent. I gave him a B+ and C+, and I guess he didn't like the grade.
Who else is on the block list?
Those two.
Those two? Okay. Switching over to the Raiders, between you look at the Chiefs, and it seems that, for several years now, that they figured out a formula with Andy Reid, okay? And I give the Chiefs a lot of credit moving off of Alex Smith because they were still doing a lot of winning with him.
Yes.
To say, hey, we're going to invest in this young guy. The Chiefs being in this spot farther than they've ever been, really. Yeah. What does it say about the franchise in comparison to what's happening with the Raiders?
Oh, man. My goodness. The Chiefs are a more impressive franchise than the Rams. I think what the Chiefs are doing with Patrick Mahomes, this kid looks like way better than Jared Goff.
Yeah.
Like the Rams, it's like McVay, you're doing a good job with like Matt Schaub 2.0. Very interesting. But what Andy Reid has done is he took a guy who a lot of the NFL thought, well, he's not going to work out. I mean, coaches I talked to who have been in the league a long time said, well, he's from Texas Tech. I mean, no quarterback from Texas Tech has ever worked. Andy Reid said, I can make it work. And not only that, he's turning him into it like Aaron Rodgers or better. Right. This organization is cutting edge. It's at the forefront of where the NFL is going. And everyone wants a guy like Mahomes. Everyone wants a guy like Tyreek Hill. Everyone wants a tight end like Kelsey. Everyone wants a head coach like Andy Reid. I mean, to me, other than the Patriots, that's the franchise in the AFC.
The state of the Raiders right now, in your opinion?
It's not good. The way I would talk about the Raiders is in comparison to the 49ers, and I honestly can't differentiate which team organization is worse off.
Because some people would say, oh, it's easy. The 49ers are definitely the team that's in better shape. It's not like that for you.
I wouldn't say that at all. The Raiders have a quarterback who's been a 3-time Pro Bowler. The Niners have a quarterback who's started 10 games. So they have high hopes for him, but the Raiders have high hopes for Derek Carr too. Otherwise, I mean, you got a GM who has no idea what he's doing in both teams. You got broadcasters picking players on both teams. You got owners who mean well and have no clue what they're doing. And the only way I would differentiate them is that the Raiders may have a nicer stadium in a couple of years. I mean, Levi's is a disaster.
Levi's is a disaster?
Levi's is a disaster. It's generic. There's no home field advantage. It's sterile. It's in Santa Clara. It's not a good stadium. It looks like generic Stadium B in like Madden 1999. You know, it's just a lot of steel and all. The scandalous thing is that you got one side in the sun, the other side is like a condo. It's like the haves and the have-nots in the same. It's a bad look. The Raiders, their little palace in Las Vegas that the taxpayers are paying for is going to be unbelievable. Right. So at least they got that going for them. And then you'd say, well, they have all these draft picks. Theoretically, they have more ammunition to improve than the Niners, although I don't have any confidence in the Raiders picking the right players. I mean, I think both teams are basically wandering in the wilderness like the Israelites were. And it's like you got 40 years left, guys, you know. So you're just going to keep wandering in circles until you find the promised land.
Well, this segues into another talking point because, I mean, you look at and covering the league, right? You're just seeing, like, how organizations are structured, okay? Which leads me to think, and I want to dive into this discussion, the top 5 best-run franchises and the worst-run franchises.
It's a great topic. I love this. Let's start with the best.
Okay.
In order.
Okay.
Okay. So
the top one, number one, top of the line.
What do you think?
Patriots.
Of course.
Right.
I mean, they're the Alabama of the NFL. Right. Number 2, I would put New Orleans.
Really?
I would, although clearly in the NFL, it's like
even with
the
their
Patriots
their
and everyone else. They've been at least good for almost 15 years, since Drew Brees has gotten there. They've been consistently good, and I think they're going to win the Super Bowl this year. They've won a Super Bowl already. I would put them number 2. Number 3, I would put a team that didn't even make the playoffs this year, but has had success going for decades, the Steelers. I mean, the Steelers, they're a little bit down right now, but next year they'll be in it. And the year after that, they'll be in it. And they have a great head coach who, they have a great quarterback. They have great ownership. And every team wants to be like the Steelers. They're the model because they rarely fire head coaches. They've had 3 head coaches like the last, 50 years, something like that. They are the model of stability in the NFL. Then number 4, I would put Seattle, the Seattle Seahawks. Again, they were down this year, but as I said earlier, they're always going to be good with Pete Carroll. They've won a Super Bowl. They've been there twice.
You've seen John Schneider's handiwork.
Yeah, I mean, everyone expected them to take a step back this year. It didn't happen. It's not going to happen with them. They may never win another Super Bowl, but they're always going to be a factor. And then number 5, I would put the Chiefs. And then number 6, I would put the Rams. Those two are quite close. Okay. They're both on the cusp, but I would lean toward the Chiefs because I'm picking them to go to the Super Bowl this year. So
Yeah.
I think they're going to take a step.
Stick with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the worst run then. Okay. Give me. I want to save the best for last on this one.
Well,
okay,
I'll go in order with that one too.
Okay.
I'll go in order with that one too. To me, maybe this is going to be a controversial list, but the worst team in the league, I wouldn't even put the Cleveland Browns bottom 5, even though they've been the worst team for so long. They have promise. They have Baker Mayfield. He really played well. I mean, he plays with a chip on his shoulder. He's quite a competitor. Not the Browns. Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah.
They've been the worst my whole life. They're a joke. They're cheap. That's the thing about it.
Yeah.
They're cheap. They held on to their Marvin Lewis forever because they didn't feel like getting someone else or paying someone not to work for him.
Right.
They get this Zach Taylor guy to replace him. He's probably going to make like $3 million this year, something ridiculous. They don't even spend the money to have their own scouting staff.
They keep Andy Dalton.
Yeah, I mean, they're a joke. They shouldn't even really exist. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you don't really think about them because they're in Florida, but another cheap organization, the Glazers, they have never given a quarterback a second contract. That's all you need to know. I mean, there's no stability, no commitment to winning in Tampa. Number 3.
And so they lucked themselves into a Super Bowl.
Well, sure. They had Tony Dungy. They had a good couple of runs. They had some great players, but didn't work. There was no way to sustain that. And now they have very little hope. I mean, they've got Bruce Arians, who's a good coach, and he won with another awful franchise, which brings me to my third franchise on the worst list. Bruce Arians knows how to work with them. The Arizona Cardinals. I would say they're
They
the
were
worst.
just in the NFC title game.
Yeah, and the Niners were in the NFC title game with Jim Harbaugh. I would put that on Bruce Arians. I have a tremendous respect for Bruce Arians.
Yeah.
For him to win with Carson Palmer and that franchise.
And Brian Lindley.
I mean, but look at them now. I mean, look at the Cardinals
gosh.
now.
Yeah.
They just hired a head coach who got fired in college. Yeah. The guy's coming off of firing, and he didn't win. And they think he's going to be the next big thing in the NFL. I mean, it's the biggest joke in the league. The Cardinals have no direction. They make the Niners look really good, although they beat the Niners twice this year.
Yeah.
So my final 2 teams on the bottom 5 list would be the Niners and the Raiders, and I would put the Niners as slightly worse than the Raiders in terms of organizational futility, but it's neck and neck.
Given what has happened recently with the Raiders,
I would only put it on the Raiders. I mean, the Raiders, they were a joke this year.
Right.
But the Niners weren't. The Niners were a joke too. I mean, they just had more excuses. They had injuries and stuff. Looking toward the future, the Raiders have more clarity at the quarterback position. You still don't know about Jimmy Garoppolo. And the Raiders have all these picks. The Niners have 5 picks next year. Yeah. And they have a million holes. They really can't. Even after this year, they're still going to be rebuilding. Both teams are going to be rebuilding, clearly. But theoretically, if the Raiders hit these draft picks, they're going to be pretty good. Yeah. I don't expect them to hit. But theoretically, that's why I would put them. That's why I would go.
Wow. Just incredible. I want to talk more because I have another talking point in regard to what's happening with the 49ers. But in the meantime, let's check it.
I want that, unless you were getting back some serious picks, and the Niners just don't have the picks to give. I don't think it's feasible. I don't think it's going to happen. And I think John Lynch is smart enough to avoid it.
Yeah, and I don't think the return on investment is there. It's like, a big play guy. Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, like I said, you have to say that you would have to be in a position to win the Super Bowl with that move.
Right.
And they're not. Don't do it. Don't do it.
With all that said, he ends up on the Patriots.
Right, right, of course. Of course.
Hey, we want to get to our final